Well, here we are in some beautiful West Country sunshine, celebrating a rather big event today, 100 years of motorcycling. Well, we know the first motorbike was made a little more than 100 years ago, but over the past 100 years we've seen a lot of progress in the development of motorcycles, right from the old engine in a cycle frame, belt drive, saddle tanks, and right up to the modern machines such as this. Taylor's Motorcycles here at Misterton have been in the business for many, many years now, and it was their idea to celebrate 100 years of motorcycling. We got bikes here this week representing practically every year of that motorcycling era. We're going to take you around and introduce you some of the bikes and the riders, and hope you have a pleasant view of all this as we hope to enjoy a very pleasant day among the bikers. Well, what a wonderful turnout we got here today. Talk about bikes, ancient and modern. I'm really drooling over the interesting stuff here, especially the couple. There's a gold star there we'll have a chat about later. But we want to go back to some of the old stuff. Lovely old Sunbeam there, another famous British make. But the oldest bike here today is this famous machine here, that I'm not going to tell you much about because we've got a knowledgeable chap here, who's Rodney Hann. He's the chairman of the Dorset section of the Vintage Motorcycle Club. Good morning, Rodney.
Yes, good
morning. Now you tell us a little bit about this one.
This is a 1901 Ormond. It belongs to a gentleman in Sherborne, Nigel Sims. It's the very first machine ever registered in Dorset. BF1 was the original registration.
I understand there was some controversy. They didn't like the initials BF in those days because of the... and what did they change it to?
Well, BF, of course, being bloody full one. They changed all the BFs to FX.
That wasn't much better.
From 1903, FX, right to the present time, until they just altered them recently, was the Dorset registrations.
That's right, yes. Now, this is what we were talking about when I did the introduction to the show. When they started building motorcycles, it was merely an engine in a motorcycle frame.
It was, yes, an engine strapped to a heavyweight bicycle
frame,
really,
yeah.
Yes.
And I remember the early Phelan and Moore, the Panthers it became,
yes,
they put theirs in the front part of the frame, and they kept that right the way through their motorcycle era with the big bikes in there.
Oh, they experimented and put the engine everywhere.
Anyway, you're quite pleased with the turnout to see this here today.
It's wonderful,
And not only did you bring the oldest bike here, but you brought another very interesting bike from the 30s, I believe?
1921.
21. No, correct me there. Let's go and have a look at that one. Well, we're up into the 20s now, as Rodney said, 1921. A very famous make of bike. This was I think they called them the gentleman's motorcycle in their day, the Sunbeam.
Indeed,
a beautifully made machine, beautifully finished, all black, but the Sunbeam black in its day was second to none. Now, this is your own bike.
Yes, this is mine, yes, 1921. Extremely rare. They didn't make many of the V-twin Sunbeams, and as far as we know, there's probably only about 10 left known to exist. So it's quite rare, although it looks a bit scruffy. It's very good mechanically.
Well, bearing in mind the years, and that's a long time ago, isn't it, 1921? But you say it's got a V-twin engine. It wasn't Sunbeam's own engine, it was Jap engine. Yes. But when we talk about Jap, we aren't referring to anything from the Far East, are we? There was old Jack Prestwick, that wonderful designer from London, who built this. Now, I saw this one arrive this morning, and somebody said, I'll bet that's not going on the run. Now, the run's down to West Bay and back. How far would you go on it, Rod?
If need be, I would ride to Glasgow and back. It's a very trusty bike, runs on beautifully, cruise all day at 50, no trouble at all.
That's what you call faith in the old machines. Yeah. They were wonderful, the famous old Sunbeam. Well, we got three more old timers here, back in the teens of the 90s, 12, 13, 14. A Quadrant, a Triumph, an AJS, typical of the bikes of that era. We got the belt drive here, and the old tanks with the frame above the tank, the cow horn handlebars, no front brakes, typical of that era. And now, who owns these bikes? Well, a man who's very proud of his collection of motorcycles. He, having done quite a bit of motorcycling in his time, I remember when he used to be a grass track rider, when he was a mere shadow of his present self, Jack Light. Jack, lovely to see you here today.
Thank you very much, John. Yeah.
Now, these are your bikes.
Yeah.
Now, tell us a bit about the Quadrant. That's not such a common make.
No, it's not. I've had that one for about 20 years, I suppose. Never used it. Never registered it, but might use it one day. I haven't got it on the Pioneer register, but I suppose it will get there.
And the Triumph?
Both of these two went done to London to Brighton this year.
This year they
Yeah,
did that?
they did that. Yeah, the numbers are still on them.
And you didn't ride by either of them?
No, I took my AC sociable.
AC Sociable, that's
I
another.
got Mo, you see. She can't ride on the bike.
I see.
Mo's not my girlfriend.
No, Mo is the dog
my-
down here.
my
Yes, and a very protective dog, if I say, when you're sitting in your car. But it's lovely to see you down here with
Thank you.
these three rare bikes, and you're very proud of your collection. Now, motorcycling is something that's been in your blood, well, as long as I've known you,
Well,
Jack.
since I was about 8, I think.
That's when it started.
Yeah, I used to buy them for 4p.
Fourpence?
Motorbike, yeah. Pack at the Star would buy a lovely bike in 1939-40.
Yeah.
I've had E.W. Douglases like that for a pack at the Star. And I've collected them from Midsummer Norton, rode them around the fields. When they broke down, abandoned them, you know.
That's right.
That's how they all went in those days.
Those were the days.
I've had Triumphs given me. I've had Triumphs like that given me during the war. Nobody wanted them. Cars we were buying for £2, 10 shillings. Nice
Yeah,
cars.
it's rather heartbreaking to hear
Oh,
this.
you can't
Anyway,
believe it. You
but
can't believe it. That's worth about £5,000 each now.
that's it.
That's it, yeah.
That is the
Yeah,
difference
that's
now,
right. That
and
is the difference, yeah.
never mind. When you die, you're going to be a rich man. There's no doubt about it, Jack. We've said
I'm
it
trying to be that when I'm alive. It's
You
not
do
much
that.
good when you're dead.
Anyway, thanks for your interest.
That's all right.
Thanks for bringing the three bikes.
That's all
It's
right.
always a
Nice to
pleasure to
talk
chat
to
to
you.
you, Jack. Right, we haven't only got solo machines here, we've got combinations. Not only got British machines and other European machines, we got an American machine, a very famous make. It's the Harley Davidson. Now, I could chat about Harley Davidsons for a long time, but we've got relaxing on a Sunday morning here is Peter Bovenizer all the way from Ireland. Peter, do tell us about your lovely machine.
Well, it's a 1915 Harley Davidson, and it is a Model J, which was the all-electric model. It actually had coil ignition and electric lights back in 1915. The bicycle was found in 1955 by my father in West Cork, literally holding up a hen house. And the little Irish lad who owned it said that we could have it, of course. No money was involved in those days, provided the arrangements were made that the hen house didn't fall down. So suitably patched up, we took the bike home, and the old chap told us, and I do stress this is an Irish bike, and all these stories told in Ireland must be taken with a large handful of salt. But he did tell us that it had come over with the American forces in the Great War, with a sidecar on the other side. It had seen service in Flanders, and then when the Americans went home, they left it behind. They either sold it or gave it to the British Army, who took it into service. They put the sidecar on the left-hand side, and it then went to Ireland with the black and tans in the 20s, where it was used against the IRA. But they stole it, apparently, in an ambush, and wouldn't give it back. And they used it then until independence in 1923, when it was registered. That's a Cork registration, 1923. And it was then driven into the ground, literally, until Father found it in 55. And he then restored it, and it's been in pretty well constant use ever since.
Well, I've said this many times, Peter, it's not only people that should appear on This Is Your Life, but a lot of these old cars and bikes we see around today. What a wonderful story about a lovely machine. Lovely to chat to you. Well, we can't talk about motorcycle history without bringing in the famous Wall of Death. That's been in action now since, well, I can't think how long, but I know in the early 20s, these old bikes, an American Indian, were used traditionally on the Wall of Death, as they still are today, some of them. This is a fine example of one of the old Wall of Death Indians. And can you imagine yourself going around a vertical surface inside the big canisters, as they were, that were the Wall of Death, on one of these old bikes? There's no brakes on it, but it's just got a very powerful engine and a wonderful frame. And some of the old Wall of Death riders will tell you traditionally that they've never been beaten. It's a lovely old machine, and what a fine example of it. A couple more interesting old bikes here. There's, for example, the Hazelwood, a very rare bike. And this was, as we see the motor cosh next to it, another V-twin. V-twins were very popular for the man who wanted a bigger bike, possibly to put a sidecar on or to do a longer distance. And this is done in the era, in the 20s, when they didn't have the electric lighting, they had the acetylene lighting. Now this old acetylene lighting, what we call the carbide light, it's got the container, would be normally upright there, where you put the carbide crystals and pour water on them, and that creates a gas that you would light in this light. It gave a very nice white light. And I've told the story many times. I used to live next door to a pub, and the old chaps used to come outside and had these carbide lights, as they were, on their pedal cycles, because the old coal miners used this form of lighting for many, many years on their pit helmets. And sometimes they wouldn't be able to light because there was no water on the carbide. And it's not for me to say here how they used to damp down the carbide to get the light, but this is quite true, and it happened many times. And look here, this is your oil pump here. You had the pump here, and you had the feeder gauge to show you how your oil was being fed and what speed the drip was coming through into your engine. Very primitive. You had to ride them, you had to drive them, and you had to nurture them. And this is the difference now between just pressing a button and everything just works automatically. And over here, another very interesting bike, the MOTOREYELING. That is a rarity in itself. So here, not only have we got a lot of bikes, we got a lot of beautiful, some of them unique in today's collector's world. Okay, we're on to another old Triumph now, 1919. Now this is the Model H Triumph, and this is identical to the bikes that were used by our dispatch riders in World War I. And there's quite a few of these still around, but it just shows the wonderful way they were put together. Peter Hallows here's got this one. Tell us about it, Peter.
Well, I've had it now for about a couple of years. I bought it from a chap who was, well, actually was a farmer, and I think he was about the second owner as far as I can make out, so I think I'm the third owner of it now.
It's not bad for a bike that age.
It had been put away for about 25 years, I think, when I bought it, and it had the wrong handlebars on and one or two things that I've altered and got it back to spec. But really, it's apart from having the mag done and one or two things like that, it's more or less as it...
Well, unfortunately, these old mags die more or less when they aren't used, which is a shame, isn't it?
Yeah.
They keep them going. But it's a fine example of the Model H, this. And how far have you ridden it here today?
Well, I've only come up from Bedminster today. I dropped my wife off at her sister's.
So you're just on the short run, but it's capable of a good old trip, there's no doubt about it. They were beautifully built bikes.
Last week I rode it up in the Mendips in the trial up there that Somerset section was doing, with some off-road stuff and things as well, so that's why it's dirty now. I haven't cleaned it, I thought.
Nice to know. 1919, still capable of a day's work. Triumph again, wonderful firm Triumph, you see, one of the old firms, and still producing bikes today. But they don't produce many like this now. This is 1915, and we got the owner here. Your name is?
Jeff Horn.
Jeff, of course it's Jeff. Come round here in front of here, Jeff, and have a chat to you. 1915, what capacity is that engine there?
225cc, single speed two-stroke with 2 gears and no clutch, and you push start it.
You just push start, and when it's going, off you go then.
And then it's rather like driving a ride-on lawnmower, really. It just goes on and on, yeah.
And sounds rather like a ride-on lawnmower too.
That's right. Very reliable. Done some long trips on it, you know, Bristol to Bournemouth and Bristol to Weymouth, and I've done 3 or 4 laps of the Isle of Man TT course and the vintage runs over there. Been very reliable. Never packed up on the road.
It's wonderful.
But
when you think, see, to tell you nothing you can sort out.
Yeah.
If you take a shifting spanner and a bit of wire with you, you're going to get home, because there's no electronics there to worry about, are there? That's the trouble with the modern stuff that you see behind. You can't touch it. But with that, what about repairing belts? Any problem with the belt drive?
These belts actually came from a power station in Biddyford. They were throwing them out, and it's a Brammer type belt, and you can just take links out of it. It's not the original, but it does the job.
Well, it's a very interesting one, especially as you say, no clutch. It's just a way, but it's a lovely example of it. Happy motoring with it for a long
A
time.
nice 2-tone hooter.
We'll try that one. Right, I got Andy Hart here with me. He's come all the way from the Chard area. They got a friend, old Bob. Old Bob's up in his 90s. He got a hell of a collection of bikes too.
91 he is.
91 now. He knew he was getting on up there. And he got a lovely collection of bikes. And Andy's privileged to be able to bring some of them out on occasions. This is a rare one, the Wolf, Andy.
Yeah, it's a 1922 Wolf Jap. It was made by Warewell Cycles of Wolverhampton around about. As many manufacturers did then, they'd buy in and wheel hubs from somebody and frame from somebody else, and the engines from in this instance Jap. But they later went on to use Villiers and assemble them all together.
A lot of the motorbikes that were built in that era were built from component parts bought in, weren't they? You know, they used to use the Villiers engines, etc., and the Jap engines, which we keep stressing is one of the famous productions by J.A. Prestwick of London, who went on to build lovely overhead valve engines for speedway bikes. And I think it's right to say there was a time in the 40s when every speedway bike in the world had an engine made by them. But where were Wolf's made? Any idea?
It's Wolverhampton.
Sorry, you did say that. It's at Wolverhampton. It's a rare old make, not many of them about, and it's a pleasure to see one here today, as it's a pleasure to see you, Andy.
Yeah, thank you, Jerry.
Well, it's a pleasure again to meet this gentleman, because he let me have a ride on his bike at the Abbey Hill Steam Rally some, 4 or 5 years ago, and it's called a near a car. Now, it does look nearly like a car, but that's not really where the name comes from. A very unusual bike, very unusual steering, and I remember as a very young motorcyclist reading about these, having never seen one. Then I found one that was scrapped and was offered to me for £2.10, and I didn't have £2.10. And then eventually up at Abbey Hill, this very good, kind gentleman, John, said, have a ride on it. And I have never ridden a bike more stable at low speeds than the Nera car. John, tell us a bit about it.
Well, it's a centre hub steering machine with no brakes on the front, and it's very low gravity because it's like a car chassis, which is 2 chassis that go up each side, and the front wheel obviously pivots inside the chassis. It's a 350 Blackburn side valve engine, open flywheel, with a 3-speed Sternly Archer gearbox.
They did a 2-stroke model as well, didn't they?
Yes. The trouble with the 2-stroke one is it was friction drive, and it ran up and down the flywheel, and when it got wet, it didn't drive.
It didn't go anywhere.
No.
Tell me, now, I always associated the Nera car because it was like a car, but it's a French name it derives from, isn't it?
It's a German name.
German, sorry.
Neraka.
Neraka.
Yes.
Yeah.
Although this one is made in this country by the Sopwith Aircraft Company.
The old Sopwith?
Yes.
Well, I never did.
Yeah, they made a few in this country. They did ladies' models on the 2-stroke one, which were shorter. They did a couple of engines. They even discovered, well, I discovered a couple of weeks ago, they did an oil-cooled engine for a Nera car.
Well, you told me the last time that not only do you bring it to shows, you used to ride it to work sometimes.
Oh yeah, I ride it to Plymouth quite often. I've finished what I'm doing now. I've been made redundant, but I still ride the thing. As you can see, the rust still comes out of it, but it's usable.
It's a rarity.
You can see I used it because I scrape the floorboards when I'm going around the corners.
It's a lovely thing to ride, and I had that pleasure of saying, yes, I've ridden one of those, just thanks to you, John.
Yeah.
What an interesting machine. Well, this is a rarity here. It really got me puzzled, as do many. It's a lube, and now we've got John here, the one with the Nera car. He knows about it because he built it. John, looking at the style of it, what year is it? I would thought 40s, 50s?
I've got no idea really, although it must be fairly early because it's hand change up on the tank, leather saddle with girder forks, although it's got electric lights. I found it in a bit of a sorry state. I found some rims for it, which I was very lucky, but the rest of it is as you see as I found it.
But I mean, hand chains, there were still a few hand chains after the war, weren't there? You had the little RE Velocette, not the LE Velocette and the RE Royal Enfield, but it was something of that size. What size engine is it?
It's a 180, it's twin exhaust port, although it's a single, with a carburettor 3/4 of the way up the barrel on the other side. It's just a funny old thing, and I fancied it because it kept the Nera car happy in the garage, and it's black.
I think you like rarities, John.
Oddball things.
Good for you.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot. Now, here's one you really got to get down on the floor to have a good look at, Martin. This is an old Douglas. We're going back now to 1924. One of our local bikes, really, only up the road of Kingswood near Bristol. Douglas's started manufacturing drain covers and gas lamp standards and all sorts of things. Then went into motorcycle production, and they always built a twin. And the twin engines before the war always run 4 and a half, like you see this one here. Then after the war, they brought it across the frame, as we shall see some examples later, except one example pre-war when they built the Endeavour. But this is a fine example, one of those old Douglases, and many of them are used even today in sprint events, etc. They were famous for their grass track. A very good bike was the famous Douglas of Kingswood near Bristol. Right, now we're going over to BSA now. Birmingham Small Arms. They were one of the biggest producers in this country, without any doubt, during their busy years. And I always said that BSA was the firm that made a bike for everybody. right from this big V-twin, which was designed really for pulling sidecars. You can see the big footboards rather than footrests. Who does this one belong to? You didn't ride this one here today, did you?
No, I didn't. It belongs to my son David Orman, and we come from Pennington near Lymington.
You've had a good run up through here today.
Absolutely beautiful. The countryside was marvellous.
Are you interested in the bikes as well?
Well, I like to see them, not just restore them, but get them out and ride them. Or
And good
as
for
we
you.
are today, we're
Couldn't agree with you more.
displaying-
Did you ever ride motorbikes on pillions,
No.
etc.?
Oh yes, I did. Going back to the courting days.
I can
my
imagine
husband
that,
had a
because-
velo set.
Did he? Oh,
Yes.
you lucky chap.
Yes.
Anyway, this is a lovely one, an era of 1923, I believe that one, isn't it? And next door to it is the 1929 Norton. Now, not many firms were more famous than Norton in that era of the sort of 20s, 30s, 40s and 50s. Now, here's one of the early Model 18s. Good old overhead valve engine. I think the first one they built like this was 89 bore and 100 stroke, and they went on producing that engine right up into the 50s with the same bore and stroke as that. It's an engine that went on with alterations around the crank area, but basically it was the same. Good, reliable, what we called long-legged bikes, high-geared bikes, the famous Norton. Well, the more we wander around here, the more surprises we get. Now we've found one, a rarity now from back in the 20s, the Jess, Jes. I think I'm right in saying produced up in Gloucester somewhere. This was another firm that produced the small engine that went into the push bike frame, and you could buy extra forks, etc. for them. But that really is a rarity. Just a small engine, small two-stroke, just to help the pedal cycle along. People getting to the stage with their pedal cycles when they thought, no, we want a motorbike. Can't afford one, put an engine in it. Supplied by Jess. There aren't many of these about. Well, if ever there was a Rolls Royce of motorcycles, it was the Brough Superior. And they actually had permission to be called the Rolls Royce of motorcycles, getting permission from Rolls Royce themselves. This was the class bike back in the sort of 20s and 30s. And I dare say some of you will have seen the film where Lawrence of Arabia was killed in his motorcycle accident. He was a owner of many Broughs and did many hundreds of thousands of miles on them. They were famous because they were made to perfection. A lot of quality went into them. I suppose the most expensive bike of their day, capable of a good 100 miles an hour, especially this one, the SS100, which was the overhead valve engine. Some of the engines in them were built by Jap, J.A. Prestwick again, the name that keeps cropping up today. And the frames designed by George Brough, they had speed records during their lifetime. And there are many enthusiasts now who still use them to see what speed they can get out of them. A wonderful machine, as I said before, the Rolls Royce of motorcycles. Right, we're nosing our way up into the 30s now. A very famous name, Rudge. The Rudge Ulster, called after the racing area that it used to take part in. Rudge was very advanced in its design. They brought out 4 valves per cylinder head long before the Japanese car manufacturers did in the sort of post-war period that we are aware of. There's nothing new on this earth. A lot of the design you see in engines nowadays had been experimented with back in the 20s and 30s. But this bike, the Rudge, was certainly a great machine and one of the more expensive. And you'll have a look just behind the engine there, you'll see a big handle. And that was to help put this heavy bike onto the stand. You pull that handle back there. If you're owner of a Rudge, you're very proud of it. Their manufacturing slogan, don't trudge it, Rudge it. And we found another Rudge here. Looks a nice little bike, but it's a 500cc bike. And according to the information on the front, it was found as a basket case. And for those of you not in the motorcycle fraternity, that's lots of bits in a box, believe me, and it was all put together about 20 years ago. That's a beautiful example there of one of the old Rudges, and I look forward to hearing that one running later. Another of our British populars, AJS. Very old firm, Later on, they were bought up by Matchlesses, and Matchless and AJs made identical bikes then, except for a very small difference in the location of the magneto. But here we've got a pre-war version of the AJ, typical of the 30s design. The girder forks, straightforward engine, gearbox and chain drive there, and as a lot of our bikes had just before the war, the dashboard panel in the top of the tank. This engine and bike was practically unchanged in the post-war era, except that it lost the dashboard from the top of the tank and had telly forks. But there she is, a good, reliable, everyday machine, AJS.
Where are we going? I'd like to see it on the run, that's all. When it goes to the run.
Right, the firm of Coventry Eagle were noted for manufacturing their own frames, very unusual frames. Look at the pressed steel construction of this one. And they bought in various engines to power their bikes. But among the most popular of them was the ones powered by Villiers engines. You'll hear a lot about Villiers when you talk about old motorcycles, but Villiers built loads and loads of different sized two-stroke engines. But my mind is taken back to the sort of beginning of the war with this old Coventry Eagle, because I lived opposite a garage, and the gentleman who used to look after the garage there had an identical old two-stroke to this, and it's lovely to see it again. Coventry Eagle, another British well-known motorcycle firm. Another great firm from the Midlands, Aerial. Aerial, they didn't do a lot in the racing line back in their production days, but they certainly earned their wonderful reputation they had through competition and trials. In fact, the great Sammy Miller down at New Milton there, who owns a great museum now, he was an aerial rider. This is a typical aerial of the 30s, and like we were talking just now about the AJS, a typical bike of that period. Rigid back end, girder forks on the dashboard, top of the tank. Attractive bikes. They're a little bit on the noisy side with the aerials, but a good hardy machine. Certainly earned themselves a lot of fame. Still in the 30s now, Velocette. Now, I always speak very reverently about Velocettes. It's one of my favourites, if not the favourite of all British bikes. But they were famous for building four-stroke, short pushrod engines, high cam engines that were, and overhead cam engines. But this is a rarity. This is a Velocette two-stroke, the model GTP. And it wasn't just any old two-stroke. They didn't buy engines such as the other one from Villiers. They built their own two-stroke engine. And it's different in as much as you didn't mix the oil with the petrol like you do normally two-stroke. You had a separate oil tank, and the feed was governed by the twist grip as the throttle was. It also governed the amount of oil that fed into it. They were beautiful little bikes. And this one belongs to a local collector. It's an immaculate model GTP Velocette. Well, we've had an interesting look at a few Triumphs today, some of the older Triumphs. Right, I think the earliest one was 1919. We're coming up into the 30s now, and this is what Triumph is producing. And don't they always produce an attractive bike? Right through the 30s, 40s and 50s, there was never a prettier, well-designed bike than the Triumph. But Triumph is usually associated in this era with the Triumph Twin. But here we have an old single side valve. But nevertheless, a reliable, ride-to-work machine, and a name that's gone on and on forever, one that we can still proudly say is ours. Triumph of Great Britain. Right, well, we've come up through the 30s, we're now in the 40s, and the reason why this one's got its khaki on is because it's been called up for army service. It's a Velocette. Normally this Velocette would have been in black and gold, like all Velocettes were and noted for. This is basically the same as the civilian MAC, but this is the MAF. It's the service one, and this is the rarest military bike you would ever find, because a lot of these were lost on shipment when they're on their way to France at the beginning of the war. Not quite the same as the ordinary standard MAC, and as much as the gear change has been altered. The gear change on the MAC was 1 down and 3 up, but then they had to change it to 1 up and 3 down because that's how the conventional bikes were, and the ordinary British soldier had to have things pretty standard. But basically she's the same as the MAC. That rare machine that we're very proud to see here today, the MAF Velocette Army bike. Well, that flying M on the tank you see in front of us now stands for matchless. a great firm, and the stuff they turned out after the war was very popular because of its attractive look. Not so many of them around before the war, some of the old big V-twins, but this is a rarity. I think it's a 500 model built back in the early 30s. So it's nice to see a matchless here today. In fact, well, there's practically everything here today. It really is exciting to see the response there's been to this 100 years of motorcycling. Another rarity there, New Hudson. New Hudson, of course, I dare say some of you watching this will remember the New Hudson pedal cycles. Well, they built motorbikes as well, and here we got that great example of a typical New Hudson. Right, just now I was waxing lyrical about Velisets, and it made my day to hear this one coming up. And I knew the sound of it straight away, that fish can. There's never anything sounded like it. This is one of the early 30s KTS, that's the touring overhead camshaft Veliset. And the proud owner of this is Mr.
Ken Woodward, Kingstag.
How long have you had this one?
About 3 years. It belonged to Mike Lane, the Southern Centre Grass Track champion, who bought it in 1953, stuck it in his shed and left it there till he died.
And I bet you enjoy it too.
Yeah,
I bet.
I do, yeah.
There's a lovely bike. There's nothing better. I've always been a keen fellow. Made my day to see that one and hear it coming up through there.
Thank you.
One rarity over there, the old Rally. Hand change, typical of the 30s. And coming up here, the famous Yowl of the Scot. That really is a wonderful bit of machinery there. Twin two-stroke. I love that. There's a bike I always wanted was a Scot, but could never find one. This is one of the early ones. Scots built the twin two-stroke engine, and it went on for many, many years. And we've got another example we'll show you later on of that same engine in a machine called a Silk, but it's basically built by Scott. Great racing history they had too, back in the Brooklands days. But here they come, the noise of them all. I'm enjoying every bit of it. Well, this show certainly brought the enthusiasts out. Talk about those later. Well, if Mr. Taylor, when he thought about starting this 100 years of motorcycling, had any doubts as to his success, then he's lost all those doubts now. And look at it leaning against the fence over there, the HRD. Later they have the name Vincent of Stevenage, who built the Comet 500 and the Black Shadow and the Black Lightning. They were the fastest production bikes on the road in their day. BSA's won a gold star for one of their machines back in the 30s. And here's one of the early models. It's much the same as the standard bikes, but they had alloy block on them. And the BSA Gold Star name went on through after the war to become one of the most popular and successful of all production racers. It's really is a valuable bit of machinery. That's I would imagine the late 30s job there. And well, to see that in that condition, it really is smashing. Well, some of the bikes are leaving now to go on a road run. One of their early runs. They're off down to West Bay and back. They're really enjoying this day, and so am I. Celebrating 100 years of motorcycling. As I said, we've had more than 100 years of motorcycling, and we've got representations here from right the early parts of 1900 right up to the present day. And when you get a lot of motorcyclists together, you get a lot of happy people together. Well, the man responsible for all this chaos, Bernie, you must be proud of it. Bernie Taylor, the owner of this very well-known local motorcycle dealership. What got you got it into your head to get a thing like this together, Bernie?
Well, it wasn't me, it was Ted. Ted came to me with the idea.
Ted's your employee?
No, Ted retired last year, and this is thanks to motorcycling, I suppose, for all his years working on bikes and working for us. Worked for my father years ago, and it's turned out very, very good. I was a bit sceptical to start with when he came up with the idea, but the more we talked it over, and one or two people who got involved in it, that were involved in the coast to coast and other dudes like this, I think all seemed to be very enthusiastic, so it came together well.
What set your family off into the motorcycle business?
My father's love for motorcycles. He was known as a boy as a bit of a crazy one on bikes, etc.
We all
He
were.
was maybe fortunate being a farmer's son during the war, so he was in the Home Guard, not in the army. A lot of his friends went off to war. Unfortunately, some of them got killed. My father would have fattening their bikes while they were away, etc. And consequently finished up buying some of the bikes and then eventually started selling them. And the ironic thing was, we bought this premises 7 or 8 years ago to move from the village because we'd run out of room. And when I showed my mother around here, she said, well, you know this was the first place your father sold his first motorbike from in 1944.
Very appropriate
So we've
place to
come home.
start up, but
Yeah.
well, you couldn't have expected a turnout like this today. I mean, we've had a look around,
Fantastic.
and to me, I mean, it's nostalgia every few minutes. Bernie, congratulations on what's happened this week, and when you see Ted, thank you from us too.
Thank you.
We look forward to
Okay.
it. We got a lot more to do yet.
Thank you very much.
Right, we've got another of my favourites here, the BSA B31. The last bike I had was a plunger model of one of these, but this is one of the, you're sort of 1950, 49, 50?
49, yeah.
49, yeah, because the earlier ones had the speedo on top of the tank. But that green tank one was a pretty bike. The engine was designed actually just before the war, but production stopped because they went over to their side valve 500 then for war production. Then after the war, up these came, and all the young lads were after their 350s, which is what they could afford, and one of the most popular of them was, of course, the B31. And you can't remember those sad days just after the war when we had to scrape a few pennies together to buy an old bike. How long have you had this one?
I've had it 8 years now.
You love every minute
I
of it.
do, yeah. It's I ride it regular, so it's not pristine, as it were. But I mean,
It's
a
used.
lot- yeah.
This is how we sold bikes in our day.
That's
They were
right.
used.
I thoroughly enjoy it, to be honest. You know.
Never a problem starting it.
I tell you, I'll be truthful with you. I did some work on it yesterday, and I haven't started it for about 6 months, truthfully. And she started second kick. Yeah.
Typical of it. You only got, of course, in those days, you see, there was nothing electronic. Everything was manual. You had your shut your air slide off, and you had your advanced and retard, and everything had to be just set up.
Exactly.
And however a bike run, it because you were doing it.
That's right.
And I think that's what was enjoyment about vintage stuff. And I don't know if you ride modern motorbikes at all.
Well, it'd take you half an hour to get the fairing off something like
Well,
that.
that's
Kawasaki
it. And I
over
mean,
there, you
what
know.
can you do? But if you take a couple of spanners in your pocket, an amber, I mean, you've got nothing
Quite.
to worry about. You get home. Lovely to hear this come
All
in.
right.
May she serve you well for a long time.
Yeah,
myself.
thanks. Nice
Much
having a
obliged.
chat.
Well, I got a good friend here with me, Mike Hames, known him for many, many years. And he's been known locally for many years as Mike the Bike, I think, quite an enthusiast. And he's got a bike that we all love here, a BSA Gold Star from 1953. Tell us all about how you come by this one, Michael.
Well, I bought it about 9 months ago off a friend who'd had it for 10 years and hadn't done much with it. It's a model from the plunger era, 1953, and it's produced at a time when there was a shortage of the constituents of chrome, so hence the silver painted tank. The engine is pretty well standard, a 350, and it certainly goes very well.
I saw you come in with a smile on your face this morning. You had a good burn up on the way from Yeovil on it, no doubt. And you managed to find room for it in your garage, as it's pretty well packed up, isn't it?
Well, I bought this really to have something to ride whilst I was assembling the Comet. But coming out here this morning at 50 and 60 miles an hour is most pleasant. The road is empty, it was nice and dry and warm, and the sound is beautiful.
There's nothing like the crackle of a Gold Star,
No,
is there?
well,
But you've got a
that's
lot
the-
of experience in motorcycling. Of course, you were in the same job as myself, and you were a police motorcyclist for many years. And you've seen lots of changes come up through from, what did you ride first in, I suppose, the Triumph Twin?
It was a Triumph Saint that was my first police bike, and I wore out a couple of those, and then we went to the Norton Commandos, which when you're doing a wide load, they let you know that diaphragm clutch wasn't something you could keep playing with. And then we went to the BMWs because the Nortons turned out to be rather expensive to run. And I finished on the BMWs, which are a very pleasant bike, but didn't have the performance of the Norton.
No, you're very much a British bike fan, I know. Well, thanks for the chat today, Michael, and what do you think of it so far here?
Oh, wonderful.
They're great. The smell of it alone is worth coming for.
Oh, and the old faces, some of which I know.
Yeah, and some very
wonderful
old faces.
day. Yeah.
Thank you, Mike. Always nice to chat to you.
Thank you.
Well, here's something that was one of the most seen bikes on the road just after the war, because it wasn't only bought by the keen motorcyclist, it was bought as a commuter machine. It's the D1 Bantam, the old rigid end Bantam. The little engine, they call it a 125, actually it's 123cc. And actually BSA didn't design that engine. It was a design pinch from DKW's plans, a pre-war German two-stroke. But what a popular little machine it was. 3-speed gearbox and so easy to ride. And you can see the unusual horn arrangement on here where the horn goes down through the steering head. I bought one of these second-hand from my father-in-law. He paid for it, of course, and taught him to ride, and he was 58 and never knew anything about mechanical things at all, and it was quite an interesting job teaching him to ride a Bantam, but he couldn't have learned on anything easier. It was a simple little machine to ride, and then they built a competition model, and then the D went on, the D3s and up through, and they produced them with bigger engines, swinging arm suspension, etc. But the love of them all was really the old original D1. Of course, here on this 100 Years of Motorcycling event, we got an example of it here today. Right, we've already seen one old Model 18 Norton, but here we come up now to 1946. Norton starting civilian production again after their wartime production. Their wartime production was a side valve engine, the 16H. Then after the war, out come the old Model 18, the old 89 bore 100-stroke engine that went on for several more years. They built another one with swinging arm and slightly different frame, the ES2. But they were fantastic old engines, as reliable as a steam engine. Good sound bit of machinery, that Norton. And having mentioned the old 16H, here we've got a 1940 model. No doubt in my mind that this is an XWD, because after the war, a lot of the bikes that had been produced for the army were sold off as civilian, and some of them were sold off second hand. That old 16H engine was, as I say, side valve, rugged and reliable. You had a job to tell the big end from the small end. It was so rugged inside of there. And I knew a lot of my mates who bought the 16H for riding purposes, and for a side valve it was relatively quick. But there she is. That's the sort of sister to the Model 18 we saw just now. One side valve and one overhead. Well, a bit earlier on we saw an old pre-war racing Dougie. Now this is the machine they came out with in the post-war years. This is the Mark IV, I believe, a 350 horizontally opposed twin. Fantastic road holding, really comfortable bikes to ride. Douglas up there, as we said earlier, Kingswood in Bristol. But they were never very successful because they didn't have the money behind them to produce them in the quantities that was necessary in this modern world of motorcycling. But it was a lovely bike, and it was a sad day when Douglas's lost their firm and made motorcycles no more. But there she is, a Mark IV 350 Dougie. Coming on into the post-war period now, not only were we famous for producing and was a country happy to buy their 4-strokes, but they still wanted their 2-strokes for economy. And the famous firm of Francis Barnett was still one of the suppliers. A very old firm, always affectionately known as Fanny Barnett. They bought loads of Villiers engines, as I mentioned earlier, to put in their bikes. Later to produce a bike with an AMC built engine, as they were amalgamated in the, I believe, the 60s with the matchless AGS concern. Here's a fine example here of a nice commuter's bike built by Francis Barnett. Well, this is a real brute of a machine here, and it's not a British bike, it's an Italian bike. And I must be fair, nobody made better machinery than the Italians. This is the Moto Guzzi, noted for their popular V-twins across the frame like this in shaft drive. Superb bikes with a great racing history too. We got to take our hats off to the Italians. The only thing I felt sorry about the Italians, they didn't have anything other than red paint out there. Every bike you see in Italian seems to be painted red. But whoever owns that one's a proud owner, I bet, because that is a very masculine bit of machinery. Well, one of my favourites again, of course, the Velocette. And very similar looking engine to the MAC we looked at earlier, but this one's 500cc and it's well tuned up too. Swinging arm rear suspension. This is the Velocette Thruxton. And what preparation has gone into bringing this into concourse condition. Called Thruxton, of course, because of their success at the racing circuit up there in Wiltshire. A real enthusiast bike this, and I'm waiting to hear this one running later. Bring tears to my eyes. We've talked plenty about the odd Norton or two we've seen, but Norton took on the road racing with great gusto again after the war, having had a lot of success pre-war too. And the old frames that we'd seen on the circuits with the girder forks and what they called the garden gate plunger back end changed over to tellies. And then out came the new frame called the featherbed frame. It was designed by Rex and Chromie McCandless, the Norton racing team, and it was called the featherbed frame because Norton's rider then, Harold Daniels, he had a ride on it and he said it was just like a feather bed. And there she is, a fine example of the featherbed frame that was designed for racing and then brought out as a Dominator frame, but this isn't the Dominator, it's got the overhead camshaft single engine in there. That engine and that frame, to me, that is the ideal machine, and there must be a lot of people drooling over that today saying, good God, I'd like that one. The Norton and the featherbed frame. Of course, Triumph were responsible for the start of the wonderful habit of producing parallel twins. But after the war, everybody followed them, Norton included. They brought out the Dominator and later on the Commando. Nice example here of the 750cc Commando. Great bikes, very popular with police forces. They used them for quite a bit too. And I think they had a bit of vibration trouble. I rode them on occasions when they used to get pins and needles up through the hands on them. But for a good engine, yes, Norton once again showed them the way. And of course, BSAs, they produced a very nice parallel twin. Started off with the 500 A7, then went on to the A10, which was called the Gold Flash. This is one of the later A7s with the finishing the beautiful green. And this is the Star Twin. We talked about the BSA Gold Stars, the singles. Well, this was the Gold Star Twin. As you can see, a beautifully designed bike, very, very popular. So they went through a period with motorcycling just after the war when certainly the parallel twin led everybody in the field. It was so smooth and easy to start to compare with the old single, but I was happy with the old single. I loved the character of it, but what a lovely example that is of a BSA Star Twin. Next to it is the matchless parallel twin. They're all very similar in appearance, but they were all slightly different in their construction. Certainly the Matchless and AJ, which are identical, they'd be in the same firm, they produced this twin with slightly different bearing layout in there. They all had their, well, everyone said whatever they had was better than the other one, but they all produced very good machines. There's typical of the, it's got the proper matchless silencers on there too. They had a flat sound of their own and a huge dual seat that was like a big settee, a very comfortable bike to ride. And here bikes were getting more comfortable now. The firms concentrating on suspension, comfortable riding, whereas before the war, as long as you could get from A to B, with a few bruises on your backside, nobody seemed to mind very much. Well, the originator, Ed Turner, was the originator of the Triumph Twin back in the 30s. And some people say the Triumph Twin was never beaten. Others will argue with that. But here we've got a Triumph Twin coming up in the 60s, I see now, with different front suspension. That suspension's been put on there for a purpose. It gives a different steering trail, because if you have a sidecar on the side, as you can see this old Triumph has, then it does affect your steering. It makes it a bit heavy. And if you can stick the front wheel a little bit further forward, then you improve the trail angle and makes it a lot lighter to steer. Now that looks a very potent little outfit. We'll talk for a while about sidecar outfits. It's an abomination of engineering really as a motorbike and sidecar, but it's one of the most pleasant things to own and ride. Back when I had a chair, back when the family were small, that was when you only paid half the amount of insurance for combination that you did for a solo bike. So that was one advantage, and of course we couldn't afford cars and run them, so bikes and sidecars were very common and very popular. It was a chance to take the family out, and there was a lot of experimenting done as to the best layout, and I think at one time they had a pretty set way as how you should set your sidecar up, but that famous Norton sidecar champion Eric Oliver, he did a lot of experimenting and people changed their minds a lot after that. So we'll have a look at a few combinations now. Now this was one of the most popular of the sidecar bikes when someone wanted to put a big sidecar on. That was a big 600cc Panther. The P&M Panther, built by Phelan and Moore. And I did mention earlier that when motorcycling started and people put an engine into a pedal cycle, P&M put it in the front part of a cycle frame. Now, there's a fine example how they continued that sloper type engine, and that engine does take up the part of the frame. A lot of difference between that frame and a pedal cycle frame, but here she is, the big plunker of a Panther. Powerful machine. Would take a big double adult sidecar like that one on there. Cheap motoring and pleasant motoring too. Another example, this is the rather more attractive sidecar than the simple double adult one by Canterbury that we saw on the Panther now. This is I think a Watsonian sports sidecar. Watsonian, a firm that still exists, and it's pulled by a nice, just post-war Ariel 500. Is it Bonnie?
Yeah.
I thought it was the Bonneville you had there. We were talking about the instigator of the twin, the old Ed Turner, and what a wonderful job he did with his bikes. What year is this one?
1969.
69?
Yeah.
Still going strong?
Well, they reckon it's probably one of the best years for them. By now they'd ironed out all the creases, and it was like, you know, when Meriden was at its height, and
well, it was called Bonneville because of its popularity in the States.
That's right.
We used to go out there and cane the pants off of their big 1000cc twins, didn't we?
Of course we would. We're British, aren't we? When all said
Sounds like a well-spoken there. A good old traditional bike based on the old pre-war parallel twin, but they went on educating it and still producing a lovely bike now. The name of Triumph. A very proud owner.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We got a rarity here, the Aramachi built by Harley Davidson.
No, the other way around.
Harley Davidson built by Aramachi.
No, well, it's Aramaki.
Yeah.
But it's got a Harley Davidson name on it.
But it's a copy of an Italian design though, isn't it?
No, it is an Italian bike.
Yeah.
And they built them. The Americans wanted a 250 class for the 60s, and Aramaki built them a 250. This is the Italian version of it. The American had deeper mudguards and high handlebars and big seat. And this is the original Italian.
But like all Italian design stuff, a joy to own, a joy to drive, a real toy.
Fun, yeah.
Fun. Makes you. How old are you today? 18.
Ah, about that. Yeah.
About that. Lovely. Triumph was always forward-thinking with all their design, as I did say earlier that they always designed a beautiful bike. In the 60s, late 50s and 60s, scooters were getting very popular. The Vespas and Lambrettas were coming over here. So Triumph decided to design a motorbike that had that smoother line. So they brought out the, first of all, this 350, the 21. It's a different sort of frame altogether, and it's got this cowl at the back, which was named by the motorcycle fraternity as the Bathtub Triumph. It was a nice little bike to ride. It didn't go down too well at first, but now very sought after. It's, once again, famous name of Triumph. Well, I then mentioned about the popularity of scooters, Vespa and Lambretta. Not a lot of difference to look at, Italian design, but Vespas were built in this country by Douglas motorcycles that we have spoken about, of Kingswood in Bristol. Here's a fine example of, this is a later 60s Vespa, but not much different to the earlier ones. I have ridden one, and the one I rode was rather frightening because it was the first time I'd ridden with a twist grip change. You had to sort of twist the grip to change gears on it. Two-stroke engine at the back, and you could ride the work there and keep relatively free of the mud and dirt, but they never had the handling, of course, of a motorbike, and they weren't my fancy, but they were very popular amongst the young, especially the young ladies. Right, the next era of motorcycling, I suppose, we roll into is the influx of Japanese motorcycles. Came as a great shock to us when the Japs started sending bikes over here to sell, revving twice as fast as our bikes, and we old bikers were saying they won't last 5 minutes. How wrong we were. They showed us how they studied our bikes, studied the faults, ironed them all out, done away with drips of oil on the floor and oily boots, and brought out some really fine machinery. Here we got a 4-cylinder one, a Super Sport. I would estimate that as being a 1970s model, but just look at the finish. The road holding in the earlier ones didn't compete with the British. They were a little bit prone to wobble and weave, but they ironed it all out. And now I'm afraid most of the bikes we see on our roads today come from the Far East. And we were laughing at them at the beginning, and they had to laugh on us eventually because they had such big factories and a big production. Our firms just could not cope. They couldn't. And the motorcycle industry, I'm afraid, we're guilty in this country of not seeing the problem and not believing that there was any fear. And how many manufacturers have we got left now? And how many manufacturers are from the Far East? Well, here's one of the early ones, famous Honda Super Sport. We saw a big Guzzi, Moto Guzzi earlier, the big V-twin, the shaft drive. They also produced some superb small bikes, very Italian styling, light, delicate, but I say delicate looking, but very tough when it comes to reliability. These two small, this one's I think 235cc this side, and well, they were beautifully built machines and a joy to ride. And one of the lads on an Italian bike earlier said that he doesn't feel very old when he's riding that, but they built them like small racing bikes, which made them very popular with the youngsters over here because they could get on one of those and wind up the revs and think they were going around the TT circuit or some Italian circuit. Yes, the Italians have certainly built some very collectible, beautiful machines. Now, another unusual name for a bike, this Cotton. Cotton's rather delicate stuff, but certainly not Cotton bikes. And it's not although this is in the 60s, it's a very old firm that goes right the way back, well, a long time before the war. I think the Gloucester firm, weren't they?
That's correct. Yeah,
correct, in Gloucester. They used to build a very interesting bike with all rods for the frames, very different construction. Then after the war, they come up with this superb bike. Did a lot in the competition line too. Made it. What cc is this one?
This is 250.
Villiers engine.
Villiers, yeah. 250
How
twin.
long have you owned it?
That's a little buzz box. Goes very well.
Yeah, you've owned it how long?
About 10 years now.
I'm still enjoying it.
Still
Go
enjoying
off on
it.
the road run now.
Yeah, we're just going to go down to
Well,
West
happy
Bay.
motoring. Lovely to see it. The famous British Cotton. It does start. Now here we've got a Honda again. This is one of their smaller bikes, but this is a bike that's very collectible nowadays because it's very early, sort of 1964, and just look at the styling of that. It wouldn't disgrace itself in a lineup of modern bikes today, would it? Just look at that for a 250. You compare that with the 250s we were producing in those days, it really looks like a space age compared with it. Reliable, high revving, superb performance, and they weren't far behind some of our 350s and 500s on the road. The Japs were certainly showing us a thing or two, and look what they eventually did come. This is a 1979, a 6-cylinder. It's like a great car engine, twin overhead camshaft, and I mean it was amazing us then to see the size and power of the engine. 1000cc that. Another great Japanese firm, and common name today, and not only in motorcycling, organs, you name it, they make it. It's Yamaha. 400cc Yamaha. Going back in the 70s with that one. Yes, they certainly came in their thousands and pushed the poor old motorcycle industry of this country right out of the picture. Another fine example of the Norton Commando here, the 750 Commando. We saw the rather heavy built one just now. This is equally the same thing, but a little bit more sporty in the Daytona colours. That yellow was always known as Daytona yellow. Popular bike in its day and very popular now with the enthusiast, and I'd like to be in a position to have a ride on that one today, because the sound of those were well worth listening to get behind those twin pipes on there. It's music to an enthusiast's ears. Well, back in the early 30s, Ariel come up with a very unusual design of a square 4. That's 4 cylinders in the formation of a square. They had a lot of problems with it, first of all, with the overheating of the back cylinders, but they improved on it, and then coming on now, as we see here, well up into the post-war era, they come up with this alloy model. We didn't see many of the blue ones about. I think that was an export colour. They were mainly in the Ariel's popular maroon colour or black. But the Square 4 was a very powerful bike, being 1000cc. Very powerful, very good with a sidecar on, because they had wonderful acceleration. They weren't as fast as the Vincent 1000, not at the top end of the scale, but certainly the acceleration, 0 to 60, was very good indeed. And I remember back when I used to take the motorcycle magazine, a lot of the writers in the magazines were equipped with Ariel Square 4s because of their long distance cruising ability. That certainly is a handsome bit of machinery. One old British firm, Royal Enfield, always advertised that the bike is built like a gun. Well-known Midlands firm. They produced some two-strokes, small bikes, big bikes, and after the war were very famous in the trials world for the Royal Enfield Bullet. Young lad from the Midlands by the name of Johnny Britton earned his fame on one. They were so good and reliable bike that they started producing them under license in India. And you know, they're still produced today. And in fact, I think there's a German connection with it now, because they went on for a long time just known as the Enfield. But now they've actually got permission to put the name Royal on there again. Now you have a look around this bike, you'd think you were looking around a 50s or 60s British bike, but it isn't. It's a foreign bike built identical. So that's saying something for us. We built something that lasted, didn't we? So here she is, the modern Royal Enfield. Right, we've got two celebrities here to chat to at the moment. We've got the little chap here who's representing the Dorset and Somerset Air Ambulance, this is Taylor's charity of the day. And here, the stalwart himself, the most important man here today, if I might say so, Ted Hutchins. Ted, you worked in the motorcycle industry for Taylor for many, many years.
Yes, I started in 1951. We had a slump in the late 50s. I was away for 10 years, but the rest of my time, until I retired, I spent with Taylor's.
Now, what got it into your head? This was your idea, so the boss told us this morning.
Nobody's going to get more pleasure than me seeing all the bikes. Well, I mean, I might be a big kid at heart, but I mean, I haven't owned a lot of bikes, not as many as some people, but to me, to see them and see all these years and makes that you've never seen before is incredible. That's what I wanted to do. But I mean, I didn't think I was going to get the response what I've got, you know. I mean, it's incredible what's turned out today, it really is.
Well, that's motorcyclists. Will you ever find in this world a better, more enthusiastic one? Now, Ted, I'm going to make good use of you for a bit, because I've been talking about bikes right from the early part of the century right up till the 60s. And then suddenly I run out of steam because I don't know anything about modern bikes. That's when they started putting the gear change on the wrong side. Let's have a wander around and look at some of the
They've
stuff.
done away with the belt and put the chain on. That's the difference.
Anyway, this is quite a modern Triumph here. Can you give us some idea, like the capacity and the speed and that sort of thing?
Well, I couldn't tell you the speed of it, but I mean, you're looking at excess 100 miles an hour these days on the machines.
least.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, it's gone all out of proportion in some senses because the capabilities of the modern machine, the acceleration is so fast. That's what amazes me with it.
Well, this is what strikes me quite surprising and frightening, is we got youngsters who can get bikes like this today and ride around the roads on a bike with a potential far greater than TT riders were using back in the 50s.
Very true. But let's be fair. Now, you can't get a licence and go on the road like I did. Well, I mean, I got a licence at 16, stuck some L plates on, and regardless of the size of the machine, we rode it. But I mean, now with the training they got far better capabilities of riders. And like I say, they really put through their paces.
And you've got a training establishment here
We've
on the
got one
premises.
here on the premises.
Which is excellent.
Yeah.
Now, another interesting make a bike. Now we've got the Yamaha here. What year would this one be about?
Well, I'd have to look on the number plate to be certain. What is he on? What plate is he on? He's on a legal number plate with a look of it. It's a V-Reg, about a 90. Was quite modern, but
Quite
I mean,
modern, yeah.
they're all the same principle. But I mean, if the old boss came back, Bernard's father, the first thing he would look in the showroom and say, "Where's the road bikes?" Because they all look like potential racers.
They
these
do,
days.
and this is what I can never understand, the way you even get the trainers going out on the road with them with that riding position, whereas if we wanted something comfortable to ride, we always like to sit up and beg.
Yes, you would. I mean, it puts a lot of weight on your wrists. And then for the pillion, if you see where the girls got their legs on these pillions, it's incredible. You wouldn't think they'd be able to get off.
Look. But anyway, Ted, another big improvement has not only been the fantastic improvement in engineering and machinery, but is those tyres, isn't it? I mean, they're like a pair of donuts.
They
on a bike.
They are. But one thing that always amazes me with a modern motorbike, there's no oil underneath it, is there?
Nothing.
No.
I don't like it. I used to always know me biking shoes because they were dulled with oil. But just, I mean, some of the older stuff that we were showing on this video today was just a plain frame and the engine and gearbox and the chain drive to the back. Now you look at all that pressed steel construction, it's rather like aircraft construction, isn't it?
It is. But I mean, if you were fair about the old stuff, it stemmed from bicycles, didn't it? I mean, how they grafted on the engine.
What we've covered. They started off with sticking an engine in a bike. Now, shall we stroll back now and have a look at another make here, Suzuki. You ever had anything to do with them?
Yeah,
I mean,
we did have an agency of Suzuki many years ago.
Didn't they build a lot of two-strokes, didn't they?
Yes, it was the first Japanese manufacturer we had, in actual fact, Suzuki. But like swings and roundabouts, you move on, you get another manufacturer in. There's a nice one over there in Norton Commando on 850, look, in John Player colours.
What year would that be? That's going back a bit now to the 70s.
77.
77, yeah. John Player colours, that. That's, I remember the old John Player. That was racing colours, wasn't it? Can we go up onto the top now? They're all new stuff up there now. Can you sort of introduce us to a few of those up here?
Well, I think you'd be better to speak to...
No, I'm sure that you can flanner your way through it, because we've got a brand new Triumph here, haven't we?
It's all new Triumphs, and I don't know if you know, but Triumphs recently had a fire in their production, and their production's been hit.
I didn't know that.
Yes, only in the last month, 6 weeks. But I mean, the thing is, modern bikes, it isn't like it was when I first started. Well, for start, when you was preparing an old bike, you put on 3 number plates, 2 to the front and 1 to the rear, or a double-sided number plate. Now there's only 1, so it's much easier.
Yeah.
The colours are so much different.
Oh yeah, everything was either black and gold or a bit of
That's it.
chrome.
Yeah, but I mean, what
the
we got
aerial's
today,
red.
we got every colour under the rainbow as such.
And of course the leathers, not only the motorcycling and the bikes, but how the people have changed.
Oh,
Now,
yeah.
you look at the lads, you can see the lads with the modern bikes here today. They're going around in greens and yellows and things, whereas all we wore was an old army Hooper coat and a pair of Corby
Waders.
boots.
But if you consider, like, what they spend on leathers is more than I ever spent on a motorbike.
Oh, without any doubt about that at all. And I mean, a crash helmet now costs twice as much as I paid for my first bike. Now, this is a modern Triumph here too, isn't it? Is that's the Bonneville. Yeah. And they still keep the name of Bonneville.
Yeah.
But it's very much the styling of the sort of 70s era, isn't it?
I think they didn't have to go too far away from that to keep it current. No,
there's always an enthusiast who wants to go back to that styling.
And I mean, when you consider you got electric start these days, no humping with the foot and hurting your ankle or your knee, it's all, you know, press the button and away it goes.
What make are these over this side?
We got a Yamaha there.
Yamaha?
Yeah, Yamahas. Phaser there, quite a popular bike, the yellow one at the rear. That one there, that's a very popular machine. Yeah, that to me is a.
What size engine's that one?
I think that's a 750 there, but that's basically big enough for anybody, that one. There's a rare CCM there that's made up from the Scramble people. You probably know about the CCM.
Yeah, CCM. Yeah. What engine's that in there?
That, I think that's a road tracks in that one. I'm not too certain on that one.
Yeah.
I think it would be a road track.
It looks like the road track style thing, doesn't it? But I mean, these tyres, I mean, they're fantastic with the road holding. What would it cost you to buy a back tyre for one of those?
Well, I don't think if you got one of these bikes, you're prepared to pay whatever the price is. But what I would like to say is, they don't last much more than 3,000 miles.
It's amazing, isn't it?
Oh yeah, yeah. And what I mean, the chains and all that is so much dearer than what I was used to.
Well, we used to pay something like 1 and 6 a foot for some second-hand Renault chain.
Yeah,
that's also at 7.5p.
They're nearly all on Japanese chains these days, but they seem to last well for the power that turns out.
Well, Ted, you've been a great help to us, and you've been a great help to the motorcycle fraternity today. You only got to look down across there and see the crowds and the smiling face and the chats. Well, thanks for what you've done.
We've been very lucky.
And we hope you do it again. I appreciate what you've done,
job.
mate, because it brought back a lot of lovely memories to me. Well done, my old son. Well done. Well, what a day. We came here this morning, not quite knowing what to expect, to talk about 100 years of motorcycling. We've covered many parts of that era. We couldn't cover all of them, that's physically impossible. And we've seen lots of different makes of bikes, and we apologise to those people who got a favourite bike and we've missed them out. But you've only seen the chaos, organised chaos that we had to work in here today. We've done what we could to show you the era of motorcycling that we've all been so proud of, right from the beginning, right up to the end. And so it's many thanks to Taylor's Motorcycles and Ted Hutchins, the organiser, for producing a day that's been bringing pleasure to hundreds and hundreds of motorcycle enthusiasts.